Good morning. Isn't Jesus wonderful? Yes. So, we are looking at these spirits of heaven, the watchers, the angels, the host, in their various known forms and roles. I say known because, well, that's all we have, right? The ones that are mentioned. We have to be careful with this because we can surmise from Scripture so much, but we are very influenced by culture and media because a lot of what we know about angels is not always biblically sound. As such, we will have to confront many things that are simply, some things are just not stated about these entities at all, but we just hold to them. Some things are just as uncomfortable as the things we thought were stated that aren't. We've already been finding some things. Last time we dealt with the seraphs, or the seraphim as we call them. This time, we look at the last of the three, the cherubim. This will lead us into the fallen. Then we can look at demons and get back to where we were. So to start, we got to go back to Ezekiel 1, starting in verse 4. Then I looked, and behold, a whirlwind was coming out of the north, a great cloud with raging fire engulfing itself. And brightness was all about it, radiating out of its midst like the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. Also from within came the likeness of four living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man. Each one had four faces. Each one had four wings. Their legs were straight. The soles of their feet were like the soles of calves' feet. They sparkled like the color of burnished bronze. The hands of a man were under their wings on the four sides, and each of the four had faces and wings. Their wings touched one another. The creatures did not turn when they went, but each one went straight forward. As for the likeness of their faces, each had the face of a man. Each of the four had the face of a lion on the right side. Each of the four had the face of an ox on the left side. And each of the four had the face of an eagle. Thus were their faces. Their wings stretched upward. Two wings on each one touched one another, and two covered their bodies. And each one went straight forward, wherever the Spirit wanted to go. And they did not turn when they went. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, like the appearance of torches going back and forth among the living creatures. The fire was bright, and out of the fire went lightning, and the living creatures ran back and forth in an appearance like a flash of light. So, after this, it goes into the Ophanim, which we already talked about. And here, we're getting yet another odd version of these entities. But unlike the seraphim, these guys show up many times in Scripture. The description gives us a very odd view of these guys, just like the previous ones do. This may be because, again, it's a vision, and the vision carries a purpose. And again, it's a 100-dimensional entity, or 10-dimensional entity being portrayed in Ezekiel's 3.5-dimensional eyes. And this means, like we said, the features are attributes of their being that you're trying to convey to someone who simply can't understand them. So these features become things that have to be shown in very simple terms and don't carry the full point. If you could have a super angel, these guys would definitely fit the bill. As we discussed, we have multiple terms for these entities. And the Bible uses very specific terms for the whole group, such as spirits, or ruah in Hebrew, and Elohim, meaning divine entity. And Christianly, we think of terms a very specific way. I don't know if you've noticed this, but we tend to hear a word and we just think very much that way, whether it's correct or not. So when we think of the term like spirits, we tend to think it apply in the Bible. We tend to think of it applying as like humans, right? Somebody died, you're just spirit because you have a spirit, and so we tend to equate them there. Or maybe we think of the Holy Spirit. It depends on, you know, I guess it depends on your denomination, and it depends on how influenced you might be by other thoughts. So hearing it used for something else can be a bit of a shell shock. We can live with that. Elohim can be a little more difficult for someone to swallow because we've always been told it's a name of God. And we looked at that before, over a year ago, and I showed you some of the names of God are not actually names of God at all. They're phrases that have a very specific point or a name of something else that has been attributed as a name of God, and we just list it. Some words like this are just generic. They're just a generic word. God is a generic word. We just assume when we use the word, everybody thinks of the same person. But God is, this is why we can talk about other gods. We can use that term, right? It's generic. It doesn't really mean one specific person or thing, because you can have lots of gods, right? You go to India, they got like 400 million gods. You can have as many as you want. You can make them up, right? Anything that's a god to you, anything you look up to. So, not that we shouldn't respect the names of God. We definitely should. He should get unique terms, and he does. I'm just saying this is not one of them. This is how God led men to write and record their thoughts and record his thoughts and his history and his plan. He uses these terms the way he wants them used. And it would do an injustice, not just to the text we claim to hold so highly, if we don't use the terms in the correct way, whether that's comfortable for us or not, but it also does a disservice to the Lord, who spoke to the writers and had them record his words a very specific way for a very specific purpose. So we may choose to ignore the foolish, non-modern writers that we clearly know better than today, thanks to our science and internet. But we do not get to treat God as if he doesn't understand or isn't smart enough to know the difference. Did you know that we do that? You'd be surprised. We do it a lot, actually. All of us, myself included. We all make this mistake. We all make the mistake of thinking we're smarter than God. And that sounds crazy when you state it. But the truth is, every time you sin, you think you're smarter than God. What's interesting is when you start looking at his words about things and you start the way we think about the way he considers them versus the way we consider them, he looks at things differently than we do. We look at worry, for instance, as just a part of being human. Do you know he says worry is a sin? He does. Because what you're really doing, what he sees it as, is you're calling him a liar. Now, you would never think that. And you would never say, God, you're a liar. But that's what you're doing in his eyes. Because it's a lack of faith. I'm not taking you at your word. I don't believe you're going to do what you say you're going to do, so I'm worried about it. Well, now that can be a little hard here. But he does this. He looks at things differently than we do because, well, he's God. And he's bigger than us, and he's smarter than us, and he does. He sees the world a different way than we do. And we have our modern context that we look at things through. He's not just some old guy who doesn't get our context. His word is not outdated, but we tend to do that. I've heard people say these things. You just don't understand. To God. You know, he learns too. Have you ever heard somebody say that? I have. I have heard someone I know say, God learns too. And as time goes on, he changes. I don't know what God you're talking about. Any God that can change with humans is not a God. Any God that can learn from his creation is not much of a God. Sorry. Any God that's limited to your mind is not much of a God. How many of you Show of hands, how many of you would stand before the Lord and try to use any of these arguments to justify your sin? No one? Well, I didn't think so. Yet, it is exactly what we do. Well, the Bible's old, and this is modern culture, and things have changed. We know more than they did. They didn't have science. Look at us. We are so wise in the ways of science. I've heard this used to support almost every sin. Heresy. Well, culture's changed. That was the old way of doing things. This is the modern world. We don't look at it the same way. Who cares? Not every culture back then looked at it the same way. And God still said no. It doesn't matter. Now, some things do change. I think that's why we eat bacon today. Some things have changed, okay? You've got some of those sanctification, more ritualistic rules, they went away. But there's still a list of things that are abomination before the Lord, and they're still an abomination for a reason. He still hates what he hates. So we have a lot of assumptions, and we have to make clear when an offense comes up to us or something that raises a red flag, relax for a second. We run into this in psychology because this is a typical response. When you have to confront something or you come up against an idea that people automatically put up walls. They're like, whoa, 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 right? And you have to kind of teach yourself to just hold on a sec, think about it. It's good that you have defenses, but if they keep you from ever learning or changing or growing, then we have a problem, right? So, are we righteously indignant at a heresy or a corruption or a lie or a misunderstanding that will lead to heresies? Or are we simply defensive over what we've always thought was true? And this happens a lot when your identity is attacked, whenever it seems like a personal thing is brought up. You know, that kind of, anybody who's worked long enough has met that person who has a problem everywhere they work. Everywhere I work, the boss just doesn't like me. Well, have you considered it's not the boss? Oh, no. They just all have problems. The world hates me. It's the same person that always wants to go home early or always wants less days at work, but then complains about the paycheck and always thinks they would be a much better manager. I learned a long time ago in my time as a manager that the people who think they do a better job and state that all the time are never the people I'd promote. They're just not good choices for the job. Well, if I were manager, I'd do this. Well, see, that shows you don't understand what goes into that decision. So anyway, we can get really defensive over these things, especially when they come up against us, because then we have to look at ourselves. We don't like doing that. So far, we've seen some things that are interesting because they're not quite what we thought they were. Elohim being a generic term can be an odd one to grasp. And I know myself, when I first read that and looked at it, I thought, oh, wait a minute, that can't be right. But there it is, and there it is, and there it is. There, he's using that term of something else, not of himself. I thought that was his name, right? Or here's the writers that he's telling to write using that term about something else. Well, that's weird. So it takes a little getting used to. But anything that's in, especially when you see the term used of demons, and then you're like, wait a minute, that's a shell shock. But it's because the term relates to anything extra-dimensional to us. Anything that's in the class, not human, basically, in the supernatural, that term applies. It's like he's God, and so are there other gods, but he is the God above gods. He is the King of kings, the Lord of lords. Not that there are others. He's just the top, right? He is the top Elohim. He is the top supernatural being. But there are others. It's kind of hard to be the top one if there aren't others. But, it's comparative. But some terms are interchangeable. But most of the words we've looked at are actually job titles: angel, watcher, host. Among these, cherubim, seraphim, aphanim. These terms are not interchangeable because they are specific entities. They do this job. This is what they are. And in these specific three, you're talking not only a job, but also a form. This is what, it's not like, oh, hey, you're a messenger. Okay, that's cool. And you all look, you can look however you want, but you're a messenger. These guys have a very specific look, and they follow patterns. And so you'll never find cherubim, seraphim delivering messages. That doesn't happen. Okay? What you'll find about angels is they have very specific jobs. And I'm just going to use that term because it's the easiest to use. But they will never veer from their job. Did you know that? You will never see them veer from their job. Because the only ones that have ever veered from their job got in trouble. Once they don't want to listen, they get in trouble. Okay? So, cherubim and seraphim have very specific jobs. They guard the throne. They're around the throne. They are part of protecting the throne. This not only shows up in the Bible, it shows up in other Hebrew texts. It shows up in extra biblical text. It shows up in all the cultures of the time. They're virtually never sent here. There's like one exception, and there's kind of a loophole in that one, of the cherubim being on earth, and that was for Eden. So it's kind of the garden specifically. They never really instruct men. Even when you see them, they're responding to whoever's writing. Like we saw last week, the seraphim were responding to, now I'm going to flip the name in my head. Isaiah. So they're responding. Once he mentioned that he's unholy, then, oh, wait, okay. They're not teaching him anything. They're responding. They're doing their job, right? Angels are found near the throne on many occasions as well, but they are sent to humans. They have a job. They talk to humans. They instruct them. They minister. They do all sorts of things. There's a host, your warrior class angels, which we see in 2 Kings 6, right? Where Elisha's servant, Gehazi, his eyes are opened, and he can see that there's this supernatural army around him, right? So that's your host. You've got your mighty ones, your warrior class. And his eyes were open just so Elisha could go back to sleep. Let's be honest. You read the story, Elisha's just irritated. And he's like, Lord, open his eyes so I can sleep. Okay. But we see these spirits show up in Luke 2:9 and 13, where the host appears to men. You have a group appearing to men, talking to men. You see Matthew 28:3, where you get two messenger angels just saying, hey, the Lord's risen. They're here, right? But you always run into very specific ones. When you read about them, they're very specific forms. It's these regular guys, the Malachim, the ones who are just telling you what's up. So we also see that they show as men, which is another assumption made many times, that they are female, or that there's in both. There is, and I'm not getting in trouble for this one, there is no evidence of that whatsoever. Some will argue that being spirits, they can't be either, but they show up, you can use the generic where they look like humans, but specifically, whenever it does it, it uses the gender term. They look like men. Two men appeared. Not two humans, two men appeared. They always show up in the male, and there's other references to kind of prove that side. We might assume women because they're the more nurturing side, and the people who were telling the artist what to paint just didn't want, I don't know. So it's like, that's the woman's job. They're the nurses, they're the mothers, they're the nurturers, right? Men, we're the warrior class. And the painter's like, whatever, okay. So he paints up. Which I find funny, because I remember a story in the Bible about a young lady nailing a guy's head to the ground with a tent spike. Definitely the nurturers, right? Now, please read the story of Jael before you think that I'm okay in doing that, all right? What we see is that these spirits were created in the image of God as well. They were created first, and there's indications that this makes sense, and not to sound sexist, but he made Adam first. He said, let's make man in our image. He made Adam. So it makes sense that the angels would carry this. Women were made from men, and I prefer the way he made you guys because you look way prettier than us guys. I'm just telling you. Okay. Another thing that we hold to is that they have wings. But do you know that that actually is not true? You will not find the wing reference on most of these occasions. You will find wings on these specific classes. But outside of that, you don't see them. You see guys show up and talk. They look like men, but they were glowing and they were in white robes. Nowhere does it mention wings. They're only mentioned in these specific moments. They share human traits, but that makes sense because we were created in God's image and we look like humans. So that makes sense. So they would carry similar traits if they're made by the same God for similar purposes. They come across looking weird, though, because they're not us. Regular angels can look perfectly human when they want, and clearly they can shroud themselves and look just like men. They can take on pretty much anything a human male can do. They wear clothes, sometimes regular, sometimes dazzlingly white, sometimes they shroud that. They eat. We have references of them eating, of drinking. They clearly have feet and arms and hands and bodies. They can be seen fighting. We have references to them being restrained. They clearly have emotions. They have will, though they dare not exercise it if it goes against God's, unless they want to join their fallen brethren. The ones sent to earth interact with us. When they choose to appear, they look human, though I'm sure they can appear in any form, really. They are here to testify of God. So there's going to be some limits on when they do things and how they do things because their whole job is to testify of God. Did you know that you have limits on how you can behave? You're Christians. I know the American side is like, wait a minute, we have free will. No, but we have limits on our behavior, right, as Christians. There's some things we can say, and there's some things we're not allowed to say because we're Christians. There's ways we're allowed to act and ways we're not supposed to act because we're Christians. Why is that? Because who do we represent? The Lord. And so we're supposed to act like who? The Lord. Well, they're the same. So when they appear, they're here doing his will. So they're going to follow certain patterns. Mind you, they have a lot of abilities we don't yet. But they appear gloriously. They appear in ways that are doing their job, reflecting the Lord that sent them. So there's going to be a lot of similarities that we can draw from between them and us. Some people might cite Zechariah 5:9 as proof that angels have wings and that angels can be female. Let me read to you. Then I raised my eyes and looked, and there were two women coming with the wind in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up a basket between heaven and earth. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about this one. First off, no angelic term is used in the Hebrew at all. None. Okay? Again, this is a vision. The prophet does speak to an angel because he's already talking to one, a male angel, and he uses masculine terms when speaking to the angel. We know because there are masculine tenses. And there's no word for wings even on that guy. But here, the Hebrew for them is nasim, meaning women, female. Let's read the whole section, starting in verse 5, so we can see. Then the angel who talked to me came out and said to me, lift your eyes now and see what this is that goes forth. So I asked, what is it? And he said, it is a basket that's going forth. He also said, this is their resemblance throughout the earth. Here is a lead disc lifted up, and this is the woman sitting inside the basket. He said, this is wickedness. And he thrust her into the basket and threw the lead cover over its mouth. Some say silver, some say talent. Then I raised my eyes and looked, and there were two women coming in the wind in their wings, for they had wings like the wings of a stork, and they lifted up the basket between heaven and earth. And so I said to the angel who talked to me, where are they carrying the basket? And he said to them, to build a house for it in the land of Shinar. When it is ready, the basket will be set there on its base. This is referring to Babylon, specifically the fall of Babylon, which we'll come to in Revelation. But it helps us resolve some issues that will appear in the text, so we're going to come back here later. These women, not angels with feminine tenses to indicate gender, as the male angel he was talking to, also have wings like a stork, which is never a descriptor used of their wings. He mentions a specific animal, which, remember, if the Holy Spirit gives you a detail or a number or a date, there's a reason. Every number has a purpose. Every date has a purpose. Every detail has a purpose. And it's there for you to mine and see if you can figure out what he's trying to show you. In Leviticus 11:19, Deuteronomy 14:18, storks are unclean birds. They're not kosher. They're not holy. He doesn't want them associated with the Hebrews at all. God would not tell you it was unclean and then use it for his holy angels. Kind of go against the argument. This woman, not just any woman, it is in the text, it is a very specific, as in the single one. This specific woman, the definitive one, is a female embodiment here identified as wickedness. Or better, actually, the word is lawlessness. We might say anarchy. Please do not use this to cite anti-gender bias, okay? She is in the ephah, and a 120-pound talent is put on top. She's shoved down, and they put this 120-pound metal disc on top. The women do not come from heaven. They just came in with the wind. And they have the wind in their wings, meaning they have a purpose, and it's with them to move. It is their time, it's their intended. The wind is with us, kind of thing when you're sailing or whatever. They did not have to fight to get there. This is what's meant to happen. Lawlessness has been sealed away, so they come to claim her and move it. Where do they move it? The angel tells them they're headed to Shinar. Now, Shinar is a plain. It's in the Semitic region. That's where Babylon is. That's where Acadia was. That's where Sumer was. They're all so closely linked, they kind of treat them as one, even though they are very specific cities. Everything post-flood, every evil movement, every secret society, every dark ritual has its roots in the plains of Shinar. And it's been carried on since. You start tracking the religions. That's one thing I found when you start tracking these religions and these gods, you find that they all repeat what was done before. We know this about Rome and Greece, right? Because the Greek gods were just renamed. So we see a very obvious example there. But this is done over and over and over and over again. Islam is literally Osiris worship from ancient Egypt, which is Nimrod worship from before that. All of these beliefs go back to the same, and all your secret societies follow the same path. Babel was the start of so many problems after the flood because they resurrected the stuff that was done before the flood. These women are not angels, so we have no proof of any winged malachim or female malachim. I just want to get concepts out of our head so that as we go forward, we can approach the text from its perspective and not ours. Okay? We need to remember how it was written, when it was written, to whom it was written, and by whom it was written, because it colors all of the text, because it colors their views. It colors their verbiage, their intentions. So these cherubim are very unique entities. We have discussed this to a degree before. They had 4 faces that we think of: an ox, an eagle, a man, and a lion. Now, some people put them as one. So here's an example of them all combined as an artist's representation, right? You get one guy with all 4 heads. Sometimes that's what the text says. Sometimes you get the other option. I figured I'd use my one for that one, where there are 4 and each one's different. Each one has a head. It just depends on how we're talking here. They have 4 wings instead of 6, 2 for flying, 2 are stretched out to either side. They're touching, is what they're said. So they're end to end. They're not like connected, they're just touching. Okay. 2 are used for flying, 2 cover their body. I did not render it covering their body because it was an armor design. But anyway, but just like the guy before, it shows it that way. It says that their legs were straight. Now, this one's always bugged me because people do this wrong. So the legs were straight. That means that their legs were not bent. They were not misangled. They were locked, straight up and down. They were straight legs, okay? You could argue they don't have knees, technically. But it just means that they're standing straight up, okay? They're not squatting. They're not running. They're not walking. Legs are straight up. They don't bend when they walk. They just move, okay? These are as much cultural terms as they are scientific terms, okay? It says the soles of their feet, not their feet, the soles of their feet. Where's your sole, your foot? Where is it? Anybody know? Bottom of your foot. So the sole of your foot was like the sole of an ox's hoof. What does that even mean? Well, everybody gives them hooves. That was for a commission, so it has hooves. But, no. So, this is a strictly agrarian society. They lived among animals their entire lives. Do you think they know what the animal is when they talk about it? Just thought they might actually know what the animal is they're talking about? So if they talk about an ox, the animal they see the most, do you think they know what an ox is? Do you think they know what it looks like? Sure. Okay. The Bible is actually surprisingly specific when you get into its terms. It rarely mixes terms, and when it does, it means to. Otherwise, it does exactly what God does. Says what it means and means what it says. A lot of times, misunderstandings in the text come from not taking it literally enough. We take it seriously. We don't always take it literally. Take it seriously. The soles of ox hooves, like cows, have softer parts. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but for the people who aren't from this area. So, hoof, right? So the sole is the non-wearing part in the center of the hoof of an ox or a cow. Ezekiel specifically states the sole of the hoof. He doesn't talk about the whole hoof, just the sole. Something he would know. The sole is inside the wall of the hoof, and it's protected by this. It is a non-weight-bearing part of the hoof, okay? It is made of a compact, waxy tissue. It has a whitish yellow to grayish color, depending on how much dirt it's been exposed to. Naturally, it's kind of gold. Now, he says that the sole of the foot of the cherub, not the foot, the sole is like the sole of the hoof of an ox, and that it sparkled like burnished bronze. Or, that's a biblical term, for bronze tested in the fire. We've seen this idiom before, haven't we? Over and over and over again with angels, especially the high rankers. Bronze. Why? Because they're tested and they're proven. To look at a human foot and think of an ox foot doesn't seem like something a farmer would ever do, unless there was something about it that made him think that. Now, Ezekiel, you say he wasn't a farmer. You're right, he was a priest. But here's the thing about Ezekiel. He never got to serve because Babylon came and took them all out. So he never got to serve his role, okay? He was among the 3 so-called captivity prophets that are in the Bible. They all lived at the same time: Jeremiah, Daniel, and Ezekiel. They all refer to each other. Not each refers to all of them, but they refer to each other. He was put with his people along the Kibar River, which comes off of the Euphrates. This is important because he lived by the river among an agricultural society that farmed all day. He was not acting as a priest. He's acting as a prophet who lives among his people, who helps them farm. Literally along the side of a river where it's growing, where the oxes are pulling all day. This is what he sees, right? He's not foreign to this concept. He's not some prince living off in a palace who has no idea what the normal size of an average kitchen is. He knows exactly what he's talking about. Sometimes we make assumptions about people. Did you know that? Do you ever make assumptions about people? No, Josh, never? Okay. No. Oh, I guess I'm wrong. We make assumptions about people all the time. We make assumptions about them based on their clothes, based on how they look or their physical form, based on how they speak. We make assumptions. Car they drive, right? We make assumptions about the people in the Bible based on things they say or based on what we think we know about them. What would their simple minds really mean to convey to us super smarter people today? Maybe they said what they meant, and they meant what they said. So the bottom of the cherub's foot, the sole of the foot, looks like brass. He was reminded of how an ox's sole looks. It's that yellowish color. That's what he thought of. He saw the bottom of their foot, and that's what it looked like. That's it. Doesn't mean they have hooves. That's literally what he says in the text. These guys are proven. The bottom of their feet look like brass. Jesus, his whole legs look like brass because he was proven. Their feet were not straight or flat. I know it says that, but that's the English. It's can speak, especially with the legs, of always moving forward, moving straight, not veering. They're very determined, they're very focused, they get to the end of the job, okay? It meant they didn't face straight, or they faced straight. They didn't stick out, right? They didn't change. They didn't go opposite directions. They never tripped and rolled their ankles. The prophet makes this clear, but the word he uses is yashar. And you're like, oh, of course, I should have caught that. Yashar doesn't mean straight. It means upright or righteous. Well, that changes it. He's saying their feet are righteous. Not in the 80s vernacular. Proven, just, holy, pleasing, or correct. Maybe he thought their feet looked nice. That's what the word means. It doesn't mean flat, doesn't mean straight, doesn't mean hoof. But, and this is the note I'll end on, they never turn their heads. Okay? They don't have to when you got 4 heads. You don't ever have to turn and look around. But, and they, had eyes. But they never turned their heads. They never turned their feet. They never varied when they moved. If you watch a human walk, you ever watch a human walk? You do all the time. And they do this little bobby thing when they walk. Some people do it a lot. Some people waddle. Some people, but it's not like a straight movement. Because if you see somebody move straight like this, it's creepy. They do it in horror movies, right? Put somebody in a cart and you just move and you just roll. It's really creepy. So, especially if it's fast or if it's really slow. It's like a ghost thing. They do that, right? People, they don't do that. They move. These guys do that. They move very straight, purposeful, to their goal. That's where they're going. I don't get distracted. I don't get sidetracked. I don't go, oh, look, shiny, and go over here. I have a purpose, and it's whatever God's purpose is, and that's where I'm going. Even though the word is not straight, the point of the whole text is that. They don't get distracted. They weren't texting and driving the throne around. Okay? What was their purpose? At any given moment, what is their purpose? Whatever God tells them it is. Their purpose is God's purpose. Wherever he's going, they're there, right? Them and the seraphim both. God does the same thing. He moves towards his goal. This is the point it's secretly making. He goes towards his goal, and every single time you see a vision of the throne, you see it move, and we'll see it several times with the angels, this is what it does. And it tells you, it doesn't turn left, it doesn't turn right. They don't turn left, they don't turn right, they go straight, right? Because they have a purpose, and they're going to that purpose, and that's all they care about. Sometimes we make assumptions about God. Did you know that? We already talked about this. But we make another assumption about God we don't always think we make. When we believe, when you pray for something, and you believe God's going to do it, when you pray for things, do you believe God do it? You better, because that's the whole point of prayer, right? Prayer is talking to God, but when you ask for something, and you're praying that something will happen, do you believe God will do it? If he gives you a prophecy, a word, about some future thing, do you believe he's going to do it? We tend to do this weird thing, and I don't even know if we know we do it, where we take it more as like it's on his list of things to do. He'll get there eventually, because we have this time thing that we're stuck in, right? And the hardest thing about life usually is waiting. It is for me anyway. I hate waiting. They did a study, and if people wait 5 minutes in line, they get irritated. 5 minutes. They can't wait 5 minutes in line anywhere. Trust me, every morning at McDonald's, every morning, and yes, I go every morning I get my Diet Cokes, and there's always, not every morning, but there's always that one person that goes completely unprepared. It's like they suddenly wake up and they're like, oh, I'm in the drive-thru. When did I get here? And then they have to figure out what they're going to order. Waiting is so irritating, especially when you know it's coming. You know, and you can't wait to get there, right? I start work tomorrow for my practicum. So it's my first day. So there's that part of me that's been waiting and waiting and waiting. And there's a nervousness and an anxiety because you're waiting to get there, right? But then there's also this nervousness that's like, holy crap, that's tomorrow. You know, am I even going to sleep tonight? I don't know. But it's like, I want it to get there. I just want to be done, right? I still got a year of this stuff and then got to take the state test. And so I'm waiting for it. But we look at God and he says, I'm going to do this. And sometimes when he says that, I think we think that it's just on his list of things to do. He's got other things he's going to do first, other things that he'll get around to it. Don't worry. He said he'll do it. You know, it's like husbands say, I said I'd do it. You don't have to remind me every 6 months. Right? But this is not how God works. He has a purpose. And what this is telling you is that he never veers from it. Even if it's, you know, it says he is not slack in his promise, regarding his promises, as humans count slackness. Because he has a purpose and he's heading towards it. Other things may have to fall in line as he goes, but he's working towards that purpose. Amen? So, he's working on each of us. Each one of us has his full undivided attention. Even if that makes you uncomfortable, because it probably should. Each one of us has his full undivided attention. How can he do that? I don't know, he's God. He can do that. We're very minor in the whole scheme of things. So, it takes very little of his mind to do that. So he can put all of his attention on you. You imagine when you're in heaven and you stand before the Lord, and I'm standing here and you're standing here and there's other people standing there and there's people standing behind the throne. But do you know what each of us sees? Him looking right at us. Nobody's standing on the side of the throne. Nobody's standing on the back of the throne. He's looking right at us. That's what happens when you get outside physics. His whole undivided attention is on each person. And he's working towards the best in each of us. That's not always the way we want it, but it is our best. I promise you, it's your best. Because his best is not what you consider the best for this life. His best is where you're going to be in the next life and how to get you ready for that. We tend to mix our individuality into that purpose. We tend to confuse the terms and ideas among making assumptions. We wonder, if God has a purpose for me, what is my purpose? We all ask that question, right? Especially people who just graduated, we always ask that question. What is our purpose? What is our calling? Some of the most interesting 40-year-olds have no idea what their purpose is. But some people know it from like kindergarten. You ever met those people, those weird people? They know exactly what they were going to do, and they grow up and they do that. And you're like, you're kind of boring, I think. But they know exactly what they're going to do their whole life. Your calling in life has nothing, and I mean nothing, not even 0.001, nothing to do with your job. It has nothing to do with your spouse. It has nothing to do with your friends. It has nothing to do with your income or your materialistic accumulation. It is like God. It is to glorify God in 3 parts. Just like you are 3 parts and God is 3 parts, your calling is 3 parts. It's glorifying God in these 3 ways. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, strength, and being, while loving your neighbor as yourself. Matthew 22:36-40. Part 2, act justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. Micah 6:8. And 3, go out into all the world, not wait till they come to you. Go out into all the world, preach the gospel of Jesus, baptizing them, making them disciples, as in training them. Matthew 28:18-20. And in doing that, you glorify God. That's your calling. Period. And it is completely irrespective of job, of laws, of how rich you are, how poor you are, who wins the election. Nothing changes your calling. Nothing. Pandemic or not, nothing changes your calling. Do you know that? Nothing. Middle of a hurricane, guess what your calling is? Right there. Best of times, worst of times, right there. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if your friends don't like you. Doesn't matter if your family's against it. That's your calling. We all have one and the same calling because we all have a single purpose in it, and God has a purpose for us too, and that is to get us where we need to be through this process. He's working on each of us, and though it takes different paths for each of us, he never veers from that calling that he put on your life. It is all tied up in that, getting you to that point. God's purpose is getting you to that, where you're meeting all 3 of those. That's his purpose. For each and every Christian. He is so great and so amazing and so powerful that he can do all of it through each one of us in unique ways and still make it one goal. At times, if you look in the Bible, he rearranges entire kingdoms to get one thing done. But he will do that. We talk about a God who moves mountains. We don't really take that literally enough. We see that as such a huge thing, as such an impressive detail. My God will move a mountain. And he's like, that is like probably on my top 10 of most boring things to do to impress you. He doesn't care. That's so minor. He never veers. This should be, as I close, this should be reassuring for someone out there. Whether here or out there. He will accomplish his will. He just will. He cannot be dissuaded from it. He cannot be changed from it. He does not get distracted. He does not forget. And he has never taken his eyes off you. It is all working for his purpose. And that includes whatever you're going through, no matter how hard it is, no matter how rough it gets, no matter what you've experienced, no matter how people are treating you or how work is going, or what issues you're facing, or what thoughts come into your head. Not to downplay suffering, but to help you see that he's still there. He's still there. He still loves you, and he's still working on the exact same purpose he's always been working on with you. It's never changed. Let's stand and sing.